wondering lately. Oh baby, tell me where have you been? What's my sin? What's my sin? What's my sin? Tell me what's my sin?
This is Up for Debate, episode number 209, recorded June 17th, 2021. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Up for the Debate, the debate podcast where the two of us agree on everything. I'm Sean Jennings, and I am joined, as always, by a man who's always out for blood. It's Matt Mariani. Hello, Matt.
What's going on, my bad blood bro?
You got it. You got it.
Was that
real
new,
shark
was
in the
that
waters.
New theme music I heard?
Matt, we've had that theme song for the last easily 2 years. Where have you been?
I
Do you
thought we
listen
were
to
still
the show?
doing the Lego song. What happened to that?
No, I transitioned away from that like 2 years ago. I thought it was stale. I put in something fresh.
Oh, I always start the episodes, in medias res, so I fast forward like an hour.
Well,
into our show.
you skip through all the ads at the beginning.
Right,
I get it.
Right, because I already have all that cool stuff. I've got a Casper mattress, everything
Yes.
they've been sending us.
You've got the genitals trimmer and the ED medication and the bald
All
hair
that.
medication.
I've got it all. I'm set.
Maybe they just advertise to me because I'm a certain demographic.
Something that I don't have, though, Sean, I don't have a machine that can read my blood. Do you have something like that?
I don't think so.
Did they give
no.
you one?
I had to
they
think
gave
about
you
it.
one, didn't they? They gave you one. They didn't give me one. That's
all right,
always
Matt.
how
I
it
got to be honest. Next to me here is an Edison. I've got it. I take the nanotainers and I put my blood in it, and I put the cartridge in the Edison, and it develops the results for me.
Well, now we all
It's
know
pretty
who
cool.
signs the checks around here. So
It's all. The funny thing is, though, all they've said to me is that I can't open the box no matter what I do, and the results are always very interesting. So I'm having a good time with it.
you know why, Sean? I think there might be a small person inside of the box, like feeding this information on a ticker tape. I think that might be how the elves are.
Is that what all the breathing holes on the side are for?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it.
I mean, if you could have a box that like just had a doctor in it in your house, I guess that would kind of do the same thing.
Well, I think that's kind of the idea of this device, magic device called the Edison,
Yes,
developed by Theranos Corporation.
a great evil sounding
First
name.
of all, yeah, I was going to say off the gate. What do you think? So by the way, this is for those of you who are just joining us. We are doing our annual, semi-annual book club, and we are doing book number 1, which was Bad Blood, written by
John Carryrou.
John Carryrou. Yeah, I always struggle with the pronunciation of the name there. Carryrou?
It's whatever the simplest way your brain will do it, because it's like it's Carryrou.
Yeah, that makes sense. Bad Blood, Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup by John Carryrou. Sean, this was your choice for
It was.
Tell me a little bit about why you chose it, just a quick recap from our Choosing Book Club episode.
Yeah, absolutely. This book is right up my alley because it combines two of my favorite book genres, which is sort of the business history, and I've picked Disney War about the Walt Disney Corporation, so I love those kinds of books. It combines it with the fraud interesting. And so this book was actually recommended to me by a number of people. I wasn't really familiar with Theranos and Elizabeth Holmes and this whole thing before I read the book. And once I started reading it, I couldn't put it down. So it was definitely right up my alley. I know that there's other similar books on other startups that I still have yet to read. But Matt, I came in having read the book and watched the documentary. What about you? What did you think is your first time digging into this?
Well, actually, it's always difficult when we review nonfiction, right? Because it's hard to separate the ideas in the book from the writing style to the other factors in the book. So right off the gate, I think we'll start with the writing style. I think you were right on the money. It's gripping. It's an extremely gripping, well-written book. Honestly, I started this book thinking like, oh, I'll skim a few chapters.
That's right. That's right.
Sean will never really know whether I read or watch these things. And for the record, I do try my best. We always try our best. But this book was so gripping, Sean. I finished it in about 2 days, and I like 2 sittings. And I'm a methodical reader. I like to say, not like a slow reader, but I read with intention, and I like to do like real deep exploration of text. But this was a like lightning quick read for me. The writing style really it lent itself to kind of like a modern corporate sabotage like / war type book, talking about the inside workings of Theranos, to the methodical and calculating approach of our villain, one Miss Elizabeth Holmes.
What a character!
The best sci-fi.
What a character! But that's honestly, and that's one of the things we'll talk about the documentary a little bit as well. But normally, I don't like books and documentaries about the same subject. I actually thought these complemented each other well. And what's so interesting to me about the story is how modern it is. I've read a ton of these business books; they're never this current, and so we have so much video footage and photography and content that you see in the documentary that complements the book so well, because it was so well documented. But I agree with you, Matt. It is, I'll be honest, I think John Carryrou's writing in this is pretty average for a book of this genre. I didn't think he was like an exceptionally great writer. I think this is just an exceptionally great story. And the characters that, and we'll talk about them, the people who are involved in this are just so compelling and interesting, whether it's in a book, whether it's in a documentary, whether it's in a movie or miniseries, which they're planning to do both at some point. It's just a story that lends itself well to that.
Yeah, you may be right on that. By the way, the documentary
Out for Blood in Silicon Valley.
What is it? Blood in Silicon Valley? Out for Blood in Silicon Valley. You can find it on HBO Max, and also I believe streaming on Hulu Plus. So yeah, you're right. I also watched the documentary, and I thought that the documentary actually was a little more sympathetic, maybe, toward Elizabeth as a person.
Yeah,
like in like the beginning, in the first act, and it really it kind of ramps up her villainy toward the end. Whereas in the book, I think it kind of sets you up as like, look at how bad of a person she is from like square one, and then maybe kind of eases it off in the second act.
But I would also argue that the documentary is much more focused on her specifically. Whereas the book, I think, does... I mean, obviously she's a big part of the Theranos story, but this book is about Theranos. And there's a lot of side characters from the book who got cut from the documentary because they wanted to make it so much about her, and I can't blame them, because on the page, she's not as compelling as she is in real life. And so once you start playing those videos with the black suits and the voice and the whole thing, it's you obviously want to feature that a lot.
Oh, you're right. There are some name-ass names in this book. I think I said that before the show started. There's so many people, so many. There's a large cast of characters that all played a role in Theranos' rise and Theranos' fall. I don't think I'll be able to name them all, but we'll name some of the key factors, the key people, I guess. How do you want to approach this?
Well, we can obviously just sort of take through the story. I think there are a couple of key elements I definitely want to hit on before we hit the end of the episode, including obviously Silicon Valley culture and how this became a thing, the media's role in building this up, and talking about Elizabeth Holmes and some of the character of that, and of course the... do we really think that Elizabeth Holmes is a bad person or a person misled? And I hope we'll hit on all that. But Matt, why don't we start the story a little bit at the beginning? If you haven't read the book or watched a documentary, we both liked both of them. Go do it. It's worth your time. You will learn about the story in this episode, but you're going to enjoy it a lot more if you've had already read those coming in. So maybe pause this, read it, come back, would be my advice. Theranos, founded in 2003 by a 19-year-old Elizabeth Holmes, who had dropped out of Stanford. It's that classic Silicon Valley story to start a tech startup. By 2014, that company was worth $10 billion and had raised more than $700 million from venture capitalists and private investors, all around the idea of making blood tests more accessible, using a technology they called the Edison, which was essentially a miniaturized testing machine, and the nanotainers, which would only use a finger prick of blood to test. Less blood, more tests, simpler machine. They lied out of their ass about it, got Safeway and Walgreens both involved, and the company eventually imploded.
Yeah, that's the Theranos story in a nutshell right there. One of the recurring figures, I guess, that he gets mentioned a lot in both the book. Well, actually, I would guess more so in maybe the documentary.
Yes,
but actually, he gets a fair amount of play in the book. Is Thomas Edison, the like kind of, I guess, painting Elizabeth as like a
Steve Jobs was the other comparison.
Edison?
She got a lot.
What'd
the
you
next
think about
Steve
that?
Jobs was the magazine cover. Matt, I don't remember if it was on this show or the other show. I think it was this show where I ranted about the plague of entrepreneurship in our country. Do you remember that? Where my centralized point was basically that we fail ourselves by constantly raising entrepreneurship to be some sort of higher calling or a necessity in our culture, when that sets many up to fail. I can't think of a better poster child for the falseness of that notion than Elizabeth Holmes. We're always looking for... Elon Musk is a great example of this. The dude is an idiot. He's kind of a dumbass. Now, that's not to say he can't run a business, and that's not to say he can't make a lot of money. But he's not someone we should be idolizing. He's not somebody we should be looking up to. Thomas Edison was a bad guy. There's plenty of evidence of that. And so when you see someone being compared to Thomas Edison or Steve Jobs, we should all look at them suspiciously, frankly. I'll be honest. And I think... I don't think this would happen if Elizabeth Holmes herself hadn't encouraged that. I mean, she loved it. That was what she wanted. That's why she started dressing in the all black and following in Steve Jobs' footprint, calling it the Edison and that sort of thing, putting her name on all the patents. She wanted to not just be a business owner or be rich. She wanted to be idolized. It's a little bit of that sociopathic behavior that we see a lot of evidence of throughout this story. And it's just not healthy for anyone to be compared to be considered the greatest like that.
Well, I think that there's a certain premium in our culture for entrepreneurship, in the sense that it's able to forgive a lot, right? Like we as a society forgive a lot of these rich entrepreneurs for being bad people, terrible people, just because of their quote unquote genius. And so it's like, like your Elon Musk example. It's like, oh yeah, well, yeah, he's a terrible person, but we should look past that because he wants to put everybody on a rocket and take them to Mars, or he, brought back the electric car or whatever. Like, but, I think there's also, people forget, like, no, he's also probably a really shitty person underneath all of that, underneath that exterior. And you've heard stories about Steve Jobs and all pretty much. I mean, like almost
we just saw Bill Gates,
wealthy entrepreneur.
Bill
that gets
Gates
a lot
is.
of fame.
I mean, he was held up as like the perfect billionaire for so long, and now it's he allegedly cheated on his wife and was handsy with ladies and some other really bad stuff.
Well, I think it's that catch-22 of like, so you give somebody infinite power and money and influence, and they literally just...
And I don't want to get too much into the psychology of that either, but I will say the person who does want to drive for unlimited power and unlimited wealth probably wasn't going to handle it well to begin with. I mean, it's not like... it's like, oh, I'm a well-adjusted, nice guy. I think I'll be a billionaire. It's like, no, usually there's something not right there.
Right. Well, you remember what Elizabeth said in the earlier in the book, and it is one of my favorite quotes, was that she was it was a family gathering, and I think she was like 7 years old or something at the time, and somebody asked her like, what you normally ask a child at a family gathering, and they said, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she said, I want to be a billionaire. And they all, like, the adults, they chuckled and they said, well, don't you want to be like, like the president of the United States or something like that? And she said, when I become a billionaire, I can just make the president marry me because I'll have $1 billion. And like, that's where the little like sociopath light kind of ding, like that's not a normal answer that like a typical 7-year-old gives. Kind of like went on right there. It was just one of my favorite moments in the.
Well, it was interesting to see that her. I liked a lot. And this detail didn't make it into sort of the broader story, but she's part of the Fleischmann's yeast fortune that had been wasted away. She had watched her lineage, which had been fantastically rich, lose all that money, and watch her parents struggle. I mean, that certainly has an effect on a child. Yeah, he.
Oh yeah, and her dad.
Yeah, he worked at Enron, and he had a number of sort of failed jobs, and yeah.
Yeah, I think he eventually took a job in government and wasn't, it was kind of like scoffed at by the blue blood circle that they ran with, I guess, in the family. So it was a source of a lot of like consternation and shame, which I think did compound. I wrote a really interesting psychological study. Like you could, for a psych class, you could like watch this movie and be like, this is how sociopaths are
Well, and that
made.
study
like,
goes back to and we can talk about her
sociopath.
mannerisms, obviously one of the things people notice most, but from the voice to the not blinking to the, I mean, those are classic signs, I mean, it's, what, yeah.
Ticks a lot of boxes. Yeah, it does. I guess since we're on the topic of the deep-seated like psychological themes throughout this book and throughout this story as a whole, have you ever
no,
heard
but
of
I
the
really
fraud
do want to
triangle?
learn.
Are you familiar with that concept in business? So apparently in business, there is this concept called the fraud triangle. The 3 points of the triangle are opportunity, motivation, and justification. All right, and that's what makes up your fraud triangle. These are the 3 things that basically have to be going on within a company in order to basically encourage fraud to happen. Like it's like if your company has or if at least just one person, if one person has these 3 things within a company, it's basically like a hotbed for fraud. Like it's like a blueprint for fraud. So opportunity, the person that's involved, the fraudster, has to have the opportunity, basically being able to think they can get away with committing this fraud without anybody knowing or scot-free, basically. That's the opportunity. So they have to have the opportunity. They have to have motivation. So they have to have something go wrong or something occur in their life that motivates them. Like, why should I risk my career, risk my life, risk everything? Why should I put it all on the table to like fraud this company? And then you have to have the justification for it, which is to me the most interesting, because justification is not how do I rationalize this or how do I come to terms with this. It's how do I make myself feel like I'm not the bad guy. Justification for fraud is, well, all those bigwigs at the company are making millions, and me down here, I'm just making like pennies compared to what they're making. So if I skim a little off the top, a couple 100,000 here or there, no one's going to miss it. No one's going to know. So the justification is to yourself. It's basically to justify the other 2 legs of the triangle, opportunity and motivation. So what companies will do is, in order to prevent fraud, Sean, you only have to destabilize one leg of the triangle. Do you know which one it is?
Yeah, because that's the only one that's not internal.
Yes. Opportunity, that's right. That's exactly correct. Yeah, the only one that you have to destabilize is opportunity. So to prevent frauds, companies will set up blocks to prevent opportunity from occurring. So tell me, who had the... Who
that would probably be Miss Holmes
greatest
and
fraud?
Sonny Belwani to some degree, yeah.
Miss Holmes. So basically,
Oh, yeah.
she was at the top of the power structure, right? So the only one that could stop the opportunity from happening was her. So it was just a perfect illustration, I think, of what went on here.
Oh, sure.
You know, I believe she had the motivation because, you know, everything that had gone on with her past, with her parents, with her upbringing and things like that. Her justification was there because remember, every time she put out a new iteration of her machine, this Edison machine, she would say, "Oh, well, we're going to make it better next time. We'll improve it next time." She would say that internally, like the investors and everybody she was selling it to, they thought they were getting the real deal, but she was justifying her basically constantly lying to them by saying, "Well, next time we'll put out a good one. Next time we'll put out the real one. We'll use this money that they're giving us to perfect it, and then they'll never know the difference." So I think that's
sort of my question to you, Matt, is do you believe she willingly and intentionally committed fraud?
No. See, that's the interesting thing is I think I think like on the book she did. I don't know if she knew it. That's the thing is I don't know if she really, if she was looking in a mirror. I guess that's the thing about like sociopaths is like you really don't know. Do they know that what they're doing is not good, like amoral, like what?
Yeah,
her moral code is I think
the book and the documentary did a good job of not taking a stand on that. I thought, which I appreciated, because they really could have made her been like she committed fraud on all these people and she knew what she was doing. I will give you my opinion for whatever it's worth. I really truly believe that she thought it was going to work, and everything she did, for better or worse, was you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, and if we gloss on it now, in another month we'll have it solved. And if she was a manager at a Burger King, she couldn't have done this. Being in Silicon Valley, a place where everyone lies, there's a ton of money being thrown around, people are willing to overlook things in return for potential great riches, enables that ability, right? She couldn't, if she worked as a middle manager at an insurance company in Omaha, she couldn't do this, right? There's no opportunity.
Right. They're higher ups, I was going to say.
But
that would put, some kind of a block in place.
Yeah,
also,
no, and
right,
you read in the book over and over again, these companies are like, I don't understand how it works. I don't understand the tech. I just think this is going to be a lot of money, and if I lose $1 million, Rupert Murdoch lost like $125 million on it, and he didn't give a shit. That is like, talk about just an insane system right there, especially at this time, isn't it? The book talks about the idea of the unicorn, the $1 billion startup, was really starting at this time, and there were lots of companies around her who were doing it. It's not like they were alone, and Matt, we'll definitely get into this. The big difference was it was a medical company. And they say that over and over again. If they had been making software, if they had been making a social media site, they probably would still be in business. But you can't mess around with people's medical. You can't. Are you like if I right now was like, I'm going to scam people and I'm going to make $1 billion startup and lie to everybody? Why would you pick medicine? That's like saying I'm going to invent a time machine.
Right. I think that's perfect evidence. That's your evidence right there for the fact that she didn't. I don't think she thought she. I don't think she believed that she was frauding people. Because, like you said, I think at the end of the day, she was waiting for that big payoff where there was going to be a breakthrough, and her machine was finally going to work. Somebody was going to figure something out.
I don't think she ever wanted to be rich. She wanted to be great,
and that would be the end of it.
And so that's why it didn't matter what the product was. She thought, again, if she made a social media site, she'd never be great. But if she made a medical advancement that changed people's lives, like Thomas Edison, the light bulb really did change how we live our lives. The iPhone, to some degree, changed how we live our lives. If she could have that kind of impact in the medical field, that's not just how you become rich, it's how you become great. And she kind of did, so she
you
succeeded
become
at
a legend.
that. I mean, kind of for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. She'll be in a lot of historical books for sure. But yeah, like you said, maybe the wrong reasons. I wrote in here that there must be a ton of people.
Yeah, well, I mean,
pretty
just
happy she
the
might be
number
going
of
to prison.
people who were defrauded. And that's sort of, I mean, I believe she's facing 20 years in prison if convicted. Now, I will mention, cutting to the end a little bit, but she did settle with the SEC. She paid a $500,000 fine, returned her shares in the company, relinquished control, and is barred from being an officer of any public company for 10 years. But then she got criminally sued for wire fraud and conspiracy charges. And her trial will begin in August.
Now, I just heard that
it's very active.
choosing jurors.
Yeah, there's a lot of really,
to
like,
re-
I didn't
to,
have
like,
time to get into
reselect
it.
them. Is
There's
that
some weird stuff happening around the trial that Holmes is pulling, and it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to do a follow-up on this, because it's going to be really interesting.
Oh, sure. Yeah, very exciting.
No, absolutely
I mean, something
not.
like this couldn't just go down normally, right? Like, you also had COVID happen pretty much right at the same time
Yeah.
that I think her original trial was supposed to happen. So it ended up delaying it. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Which also it's interesting that she did a lot of SARS research in her background. She, I think, did research in Singapore in SARS. So it was interesting to see. Yeah, I said naming the machine the Edison might be a cultural blind spot.
I think it was
People
one of
know Edison
those.
was a jerk back
I
in
still think a lot of
2013?
people like
I guess
Edison.
they
I think
kinda
that's one of those like Me Too things that hasn't really fully come out yet. Like, we haven't really gotten to the point where we truly understand how shitty he was.
It was
Yeah.
pretty awful. I liked it. The documentary did a great job of explaining how he believed he was a businessman first and a scientist inventor second, and he was the first one that marketed the concept of being a famous scientist. That was like, but it was show. He was more Barnum
Right.
and
He's
Bailey
no Jonas Salk,
than he
who
was
just
Nikola
gave away
Tesla.
the patents to his vaccine for free. You know?
Right. Yeah. So naming it the Edison, I thought that was interesting. I thought the reason that they named it the Edison was kind of weak too. It was like, well, we tried a bunch of
A
things.
mini
and
lab
Edison
is a better
always said
name.
to try things. So I like mini lab.
Yeah.
And you can make it like cutesy, like a cutesy font. Like yeah, I like that way better than Edison. Stick your finger in the Edison. Like
Yeah, no.
makes me think of like sticking my hand in a light bulb or something. No, I think they should have hired us for the branding, but no, not really, because I don't want to work for Theranos. But what else do you want to talk about? I sidebar. I enjoyed. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but I wrote down. I want the movie version of his life.
Oh, Richard Fwies, yeah.
SZ. Fwies? Fizz? Fwies. I thought he had such a cool backstory. They talked about how he I don't know, he did like business stuff at first, but then eventually he was hired by the CIA.
He started a company
It just
called
got, like,
Medcom.
cooler and cooler.
Which made
ran, like,
educational
shell
materials for
companies in the
healthcare
Middle East.
providers.
Yeah.
He sold it to a Middle Eastern company, and because of that, he was he was a spy, essentially. There were allegations of arms sales to Iraq, and then it was, then he like... Yeah, I mean, his Wikipedia page is absolutely
about him.
Wild. Apparently, he's infiltrated like networks of terrorists and stuff, and
telling you, I want his movie. I want the movie to come out about this Fwies guy. So I thought that was really cool. Oh yeah, what I guess there were some things I didn't fully understand. And
Yeah.
maybe you being a private sector Joe, you could tell me how come. So when they would bring the machine to the investors,
Yeah.
right, and they would do a quick test of the blood. They'd prick their finger and they would like send it through. And
Yeah,
then
they
went
they
out
never
to
claimed the
lunch
results
or
were
walked around the
instantaneous.
building.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So they said it takes a few minutes.
Yes.
Let's go grab
Yeah,
some
the advantage of the Edison
We'll
was
come back.
not that it was speed,
Okay.
it was that it could be done all in
We got some
one.
tapas.
And so, you know, they knew it was going to take a time to get the results back. So, yes, they would take them out of the room, and then they would then take the blood, not put it in the Edison, actually test it on commercial-grade lab equipment, and then, yes, produce their results. Among other things, yeah.
And that was the big fraud, right? So if those of you who haven't read the book who want to know why this all went badly, is essentially the machine did not do what it was marketed to do. It did
200. They claimed 200 tests.
They had a menu.
And most of them would cost
Remember the menu?
$4 or $5 a piece. Whereas a blood test now, you know, you can do a panel of blood tests and it's easily $300-$400 out of pocket.
Yes. So it was supposed to make blood tests convenient, inexpensive. It was basically, I wrote it down, they marketed this whole thing as the iPod of healthcare. That was essentially what this was supposed to be. Right in your home, right in your hand. They even designed, I noticed they designed the machine.
Well, they literally hired Apple designers to do it. And Apple's marketing firm to market it.
Yes. Yeah, right. Yes. So there was a definite obsession with Apple around there, right? And we talked about how the black turtlenecks and everything. A lot of people compare this story to
Yes.
Fire. Have you watched the Fire documentary? So I haven't read.
Not that I'm aware of.
Are there any books about that? Okay. Just because I find that whole thing so fascinating too, but I don't really think these are the same. These are like really in this. It shouldn't really. Not that they shouldn't be in the same conversation. I just, after hearing more about this story and researching it, I think that it's a little bit different, right? People like to say millennials crazy. They just do things. They don't have the experience. Blah blah blah. But I think there was more like. I think Elizabeth had more.
Yeah, I also think she's a lot smarter than Billy.
Billy,
and I think if anything, I would say that comparison makes her look worse, because any schmo can, set up a fake festival and have it be a total disaster, right? It doesn't kill people. It doesn't give them fake test results or send them to the emergency room. I mean, again, it just goes to show that the scale of what she was accomplishing. They're similar stories. I don't know, maybe she deserves more credit? I'm not sure. But the scale of fraud is so radically different at this point between those two companies.
Yeah, I know that the documentaries, I guess, kind of dropped around the same time, and a lot of media outlets were like comparing.
But it also shows the loose amount of money being thrown around both in the Silicon Valley space and in the social media influencer space, right? Which are both sort of exploding, untracked, sort of untested areas, right? Where normal rules don't apply, and again. Theranos, not the first company to defraud people in Silicon Valley. Won't be the last. It's just notable because of Elizabeth Holmes and the scale of it and what it involved.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of it's like a no man's land. Both of those zones. Where, for you, when you were reading this book, where was your first clue of like, there's more to this? Like, there's, I kind of had a moment where I was like reading it and I was like, this is more, there's more involved in this than meets the eye.
That's a really good question.
Where do you think that was like for you?
think,
like,
I knew a little bit of the story coming in, so it wasn't a total surprise. I think where the story turned for me was Walgreens and Safeway. And I say that because if Theranos was just a company developing a box in a lab, good for them. Great. Hey, even if they're like testing it with drug companies, great, you should do that. That's thumbs up. Don't lie about it, but thumbs up. The second it turns into, we desperately need money and we've got to get these machines out there. Hey, let's call a giant drugstore chain and a giant supermarket chain and commit them to hundreds of millions of dollars, renovating their stores and putting their customers on the line so we can test our device. That's where it goes from like Silicon Valley fraud to cross state lines, national healthcare consumer fraud. And that, I think, was downfall of the company. I genuinely feel, not that they maybe would have never solved it, but if they hadn't done that and they had managed to stay smaller and more in the actual medical field, I think there would have been a much higher chance of them actually succeeding than going this route, because they were private for so long that they could make these claims and buy themselves time. The second you have consumers testing on the device, it's a ticking clock. Someone's eventually going to figure out, wait, you're taking giant amounts of blood instead of small amounts of blood. You're not testing them in the machines. You're shipping them to Palo Alto. The results don't make any sense, which we now know because you're doing it in massive scale. It was just a disastrous turn for them.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that as the turning point. Mine was really similar. It was different, but for similar reasons, I should say. It was, for me, that moment was the when she tested the product. She tested the Edison on the cancer patients in Tennessee, right? So she brought the device out to Tennessee. They were testing it on patients with terminal cancer of the blood, I believe. And she said something like, she was like, look at the you should have seen the look on their faces, essentially, like what like a con man or fraudster would say, as in like they really believed that this could work. The whole thing though was that was one of their like first preliminary tests. It didn't work. The tests were like wildly wrong, but they I guess skewed all the tests in a way that made it seem plausible to give them hope. But I think we see that in like, oh, how chilling that she said that. But I really think in the gears in her mind, it was like, I'm giving these people hope. I'm the like showman. I'm the deliverer. I can, make them believe in this product. Yeah. That was like, like a magician's hat. With a rabbit coming out of it, basically. So that to me was the moment where I was like, oh, shit. She is not, what's going on
up here for her. It's a checklist, right? Here are the 30 things I have to do to become a world-famous Edison inventor. And this was just a check on a box. It wasn't about the people. It was about getting to that goal single-mindedly. I mean, I think there's so many moments in this book. I recall when they went down to Mexico and were testing in rural villages in Mexico where the machines just didn't work and people were getting sick. I recall what was the other one I just had in my mind? I'll remember it. But it just reminds you that fraud is not a single moment. Fraud is not a single decision. It's a series of decisions you have to make over time, over and over again, in order to actually get to that endpoint of saying, when they modified the commercial reader to accept small blood samples, something the manufacturer of the machine said you should not do, and something their scientists said you should not do, in order to really a full admission of the Edison cannot do these tests. Another turning point. And at every one of these points, they could have said stop. At every one of these points, they could have said it doesn't work. Every one of these points, she should have reported to the board of directors and to the investors and said this didn't work. But you can't do that in Silicon Valley because there's billions of dollars on the line. And so what do? You lie out of your teeth. And that's how easy fraud is committed.
That is true. I was also thinking of all the
which
times
they talk
that
about
Steve
a lot,
Jobs
and she uses a lot.
Steve
By the way,
Jobs was told, this is
the amazing thing I love about YouTube, and again, why this is a modern story, is I Googled her on YouTube not only are there the modern stories, but also all the original news reports that ran back in like 2013, 14, like idolizing her, are still all on YouTube from that time. So it's kind of cool to go back and watch and see how they talk about her. But that's one of her classic lines. She always said Steve Jobs was told no. And it's like, he was developing a goddamn computer, like a phone. Like, yeah, okay, he can say, screw you, and we're going to do it anyway. Like, if it fails, it fails. Like, you can't do that with cancer patients. Like, that's again, where it goes from fraud to, like, straight up psychopath. Like, honestly, it really goes to, like, at some point, it's enough to not care about the money and things like that and abuse your employees and those sorts of things. Look, that's not good. But the second you put people's lives legitimately on the line is like, that's why I think this is such a sensational story, is because it really impacts real people.
Yeah. I think, it's spot on. That's the tinge of psychopath. That's the, computers and people are the same.
Yeah, blood is just software, right? It's just ones and zeros.
Phone and person are equal. Like, blood is just software, right? Blood is microchips. Like, that's where you get into the territory of, like, no, she is not like Steve Jobs. She is not like
Edison, and yeah.
Who else was she? Jonas Salk or Edison, yeah.
But that's where the FDA comes in, right? And I think an interesting piece of story as well is the hoops they would jump through to say, no, it's just a device we're just testing the device. It's not in production. Or, because we shipped the samples back to our certified lab, it's an FDA-approved thing. And it's all the hoops they had to jump through. There's a reason why those rules are in place, and you can't just do some of these things, and eventually why they shut down their lab. It's the same thing, just flaunting rules.
Her style of business management.
That's all you have to say right there.
Yeah, her style of business management. It was. We don't really think you belong here. You don't fit our. You don't.
That's right.
You don't believe in the vision.
But that's what's crazy.
Like,
can you imagine if you added up all of the brilliant scientific talent? Because you're watching a documentary and reading the book, and you're like, oh, this guy invented this test, and this guy's the leading biologist, and this. Like, if you had brought all those people together and actually, like, given them time and money and leadership, like, that's why I go back to, like, maybe they could have actually done it. Like, these weren't, like, schmoes off the street. They had the best people in the world working on this, and because you were a lunatic, they quit.
Kept firing them. Yeah. Or forcing them to quit. Or forcing them to quit and then seizing their laptop and, like scouring their files for things you could use to blackmail them.
I love going back and looking at the they're so funny now, the Joe Biden tour, where he's taken through the labs and he says all the nice things. They point at the machine, and then they're like, no, that we locked the real machine so Joe Biden would never see him. We hit him. We set up a fake lab for him to look at. I'm like, of course you did. Jesus.
Of course, yeah. She met a lot of famous people.
An ambassador, an entrepreneur ambassador for the Obama administration, went to a number of functions. Well, of course, yes, and then the board director, George Shultz, Henry Kissinger, James Mattis, a who's who of, like, weirdly governmental military guys.
Bill Clinton. She met...
investor. Yeah, I lost a bunch
Betsy DeVos was
Robert Kraft.
An investor. And so was Robert Kraft. And
a rogues gallery of schmucks.
What a company to keep.
You're absolutely right. It was so interesting, and we can talk about the media's play in this. I was watching 60 Minutes did a glowing profile of her back in the day, and then did a follow-up piece when the company collapsed. And Nora O'Donnell, who did the original piece, did an interview talking about how she felt. I mean, she was essentially lied to. In the interview, and gave her this glowing platform. And Nora O'Donnell was like, and I give her credit for admitting it, she's like, we just reported what we were told, and we never really gave the other side of the story or checked into it. We gave her a platform to promote herself and her company in a way that wasn't healthy. And I think the whole media at the time was the exact same way. They didn't bother to ask questions. You look at those first couple pieces on her, and they're glowing. And they just say, yeah, Elizabeth says it works, so it probably works. It's going to change the world, because they wanted a good story. They didn't want the right story, unfortunately.
Right, it's like you said earlier on in the episode. I guess we're getting a little circular here, but you said that it's medicine, it's science. It's science. Yeah. Most people don't understand it, so we'll just throw money at it. So most of these investors are like, well, it's healthcare, it's going to help people. Well, she says it's going to help people. She's a good talker.
And that's another one of those great red flags, right? And there's so many of them. But the fact that no, healthcare investors invested in the company is like, that's really interesting. Turns out all the people who invested who were idiots who knew nothing about healthcare. Who knew, It's so fascinating.
Right. That should have certainly been a tell, for sure. But overall, yeah, good book, good pick. Was there any other moments you wanted to?
No, I didn't want to talk about the documentary for a second. We've talked about the book a lot. The documentary film directed by Alex Gibney, I thought was good. I think it starts slow, but like I said, I think what I enjoy most about it is Elizabeth Holmes. I mean, she is so compelling on camera in a way that doesn't come across on the page of the book. That if you only read the book and never saw or heard of her, I don't think you would get the same thing out of it. I really don't. I think you need to actually experience, they talk about her hypnotic gaze and she never blinks and her weirdly deep voice and all these sorts of things. And once you watch these interviews with her, you kind of get it. I got it. I was watching those early, 2013, 2014 interviews, and I'm like, oh shit, if I were watching this interview back then, I'd be like, wow, she seems really smart and really humble and really wanting to help people. I could see how you would buy into it. Not that long.
Yeah,
I love blinking, but I have medically dry eyes. I have an ophthalmologist who says I have shockingly dry eyes for someone my age. I have old man eyes. He uses me, this is 100% true, he uses me as an example to his other patients because I am a young person with old man, 80-year-old eyes, and he tells young people, don't stare at your screen so long or you're going to turn out like my other patient, Sean. He does that. That's not a joke. They're just like my red, dry eyes and be like,
don't be like Sean.
Don't do it. He said, Sean,
Sean, we call it.
He literally told me, he's like, Sean, I've been saying for years that this is going to affect young people, and your eyes, I might write a journal article about this someday. I said, all right, cool, I guess, give me credit. I mean, I don't think you make a lot of money on it, but at least it'll be a cool story. So no, I blink a lot.
But yeah. So you would definitely lose a staring contest to Elizabeth Holmes. See, I'm pretty good at a staring contest. I think I could probably give her a run for her money. I have won many a staring contest in my day.
That's
of course. The more we talk about
kind of the
blinking,
problem.
The more
But they do have footage in the documentary, and you're like, wow, she really doesn't blink for a long time. Holy shit!
That's true. It's so eerie and mechanical. People have alluded to the fact that maybe that and her deep voice are intentional. She's affecting both of them to give herself a certain image.
It's 100% true.
Right,
I mean, you can find footage online of her not doing the voice. And it's not I wouldn't say she doesn't normally sound like this. I mean, it's not that far off, but it's definitely an affectation. And again, when you idolize a certain person or concept, if you're devoted, you're going to really go for it. And I think that's what she wanted to be, that image of the inventor. And a blonde lady isn't the picture of an inventor, unfortunately, whether right or wrong. And so in the dressing in black and in the... And even the purpose for dressing in black, which isn't even it's a neutral color. It's just, I don't have to spend time thinking about what to wear. It's time that can be spent inventing. It's kind of so whack job, but it also makes so much sense for her because she really bought into it. That's what I always circle back to in this story. And my takeaway from it is she bought into it. She wasn't, Bernie Madoff was trying to get your money. I mean, that was a fraud with a capital F. Elizabeth Holmes really thought she was going to do it. And she went about it all wrong and treated people terribly and defrauded investors and hurt people medically. But at the end of the day, she really thought she was going to do it.
And the kicker of it is that they almost did. I mean, with the like you said, with the staff of talented people, maybe the greatest irony in all of this is that she was the reason that they didn't achieve. Like, it's kind of like a Twilight Zone episode in a way. It's like, you know, the company they were on the cusp of designing and creating this world-changing device, but you know, so many of them were so pissed off and had kind of had it with the constant lying, the delusions. One guy killed
Ian
himself.
Gibbings, unfortunately,
right? The lead scientist committed suicide. Yeah, which was horrible. So that kind of work environment, that kind of climate is I think eventually what, what kind of doomed this whole thing.
Well, I mean, it was that, and just scientifically it didn't make sense, right? You can't run that many tests on that small of blood. Like, it's a physics problem. You know, that...
so many scientists. Well, there were so many medical professionals.
That's why it was worth $10 billion, because they're like, well, gee, if she really did crack it, holy smokes, like, you know, that's incredible. You also can't do it with a finger prick, because as we learn in the book, a finger prick is not a reliable way to get blood like an arm stick is. So I just think it... I mean, you have to remember, in the very first slide deck they presented to their very first investors, there were already lies in it. I mean, this wasn't like they got 80% of the way there and started lying. From day one, this company was built on falsehoods. And, you know, culturally, Silicon Valley, where that's not... Everyone falsifies their valuation and rosy projections and these sorts of things. It's not surprising, but this is really one of the biggest stories of a time where so much was promised for a truly impossible physical product delivery. It's just a great story. That's what I love about this. It's the book. I wouldn't say is like the best book I've ever read. He's not like a revolutionary author, but and that's why it's been a book, a documentary, a podcast, a mini series. It'll be a movie.
Yeah, I think most of the book was kind of taken from like articles.
Yeah, essentially. I mean, what's nice about the book is the book is a definitive story. That's what's good about the book, because it really is the A to Z, because there was so much cut out of that for the documentary and some of this other stuff. The Safeway thing, Richard Fwees, so many of these other sort of bits and pieces were cut out. So that's what I like about the book, is it's very... If you want the whole story, you're going to get it in the book. But at the end of the day, it's a believable story. It's a true story. You know, it reminds me of a lot of the mortgage collapse in 2008, where everyone thought it couldn't fail and everyone believed what people were being told, and it was eventually a perpetrated fraud that lost a lot of people a lot of money. And it'll happen again at some point. This just happens to be a made-for-TV story.
Yeah.
I would say
anything else?
I would say the book is a must-read, and I'd say the documentary is... If you like the book, watch the documentary. I wouldn't say the documentary is a must-watch, although I guess if you're really... at least do one or the other. Like, if you don't have time and you're not a reader, do the documentary, but you do lose something. Because I actually saw the documentary first, believe it or not, before I read the book. And in going to read the book, I was like, oh, there's a lot more story in here that I find really interesting. Yeah.
The movie is a good teaser. It's good. It gives you the surface level. You really have to read the book to get the whole story. And with other people, you know, added in. The movie, it is more of a story about Elizabeth Holmes. That's why it's called The Inventor. I think it's, you know, kind of focusing on her and her experience with it. But to get everybody else that's on board, like the cool CIA guy, Mr. Fwees. He's even got a cool CIA name, Agent Fwees.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting comparison for me is, and I don't. Did you ever read The Smartest Guys in the Room, the Enron book?
No, you know what? You recommended
That's a great one.
to me, and
but they also made a documentary
on my
in the exact same way, where the author participated and they had all this stuff. To me, the documentary was not as good as the book, and I don't even think you really need to see the documentary. You should just read the book. The book was better. I feel differently about this because, again, of how much news coverage there was, how much footage there is, because of Elizabeth Holmes and these compelling characters. It is worth doing both because you do get something out of the documentary you don't get out of the book, and you get something out of the book you don't get out of the documentary. So if you want the whole story, take the time, do both, is my recommendation. I think it was a good summer book pick. Matt, coming up later this summer, we are going to be reading another book, your choice. Do you want to tease that book for us now?
Yes, I will. I will. I was just thinking of the. I was actually thinking of. We didn't talk about the leak, about how the story was leaked. Did we want to cover that?
I think if they read the book, they
lab leak.
Unless you have a particular spin or take on it.
I just thought it was kind of the movie. I thought did a good job of exposing it. I think in the book, weirdly enough, I think that the the author kind of took a lot of credit for leaking the story. He kind of like made it.
There is an interesting. There's an interesting where the whole story is told in like third person, and then there's a chapter about 2/3 of the way in where it goes, "I was doing this," and I'm like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah. Yeah, now, all right. The narrator has joined the story.
Yeah, you're definitely right.
Narrator has joined the fray. But anyway, yeah, that was Bad Blood. The next book we're going to read, Sean, is a personal favorite of mine. One of my very, very most cherished books. I will say, if I were sitting down and crafting a list, there's a good chance it'd make it into the top 10. It's The Remains of the Day, written by Kazuo Ishiguro, who is a British-Japanese author. I wrote it in 1989. It follows a butler serving in like a kind of an old manor in the English countryside. Shortly, the book takes place after World War II, but there are a lot of flashbacks and allusions to his life when he was younger. I think it's tremendous. It's going to be a very interesting character study, and I'm curious to see what you make of it. Two very character-driven books, I'll say, for our two picks for our summer read.
Yeah, the BBC News lists it as one of their 100 most influential novels. And what I'm excited about, if I'm being honest, because I'm going to read the book, it's going to be a great book, but like Bad Blood, there's a movie. So we're also going to be talking about the 1993 film starring Anthony Hopkins and Emma Thompson of the same name. So I'm excited to do both. So that'll be fun. It should be good. That'll be coming later this summer.
Looking forward to it.
The only time I ever read books is when I'm on a plane, and lucky for you, Matt, I'm going to Charlotte in a couple weeks. So, yes.
Is this your first post-pandemic flight? Ooh.
I know some people who have flown, and they say it's just slower, but otherwise not that different. But I will definitely let you know. My first hotel stay, that's what I think is going to be more interesting, is the hotel. Yeah. Should be interesting to report.
Yeah, you have to report back, and
we got some great stuff coming up
about your adventure
throughout the rest of the summer. We hope you come back and join us. You should definitely check it out. Before I talk about our links, I do want to tease. I always plug it over there. I never plug it over here. Don't panic. We just had a great episode this past week where, if you don't know Don't Panic, it's myself, Colby, and Dan each week talking tech news and really whatever's on our mind. It's not always news-based. We always try and end up with an interesting discussion around whatever's happening in the world at that time. This past week we talked about how to find a hidden gas leak. We talked about kid car thieves. We talked about a Facebook smartwatch and how to fly a virtual plane, among other things. So you're going to want to check that out over at don'tpanic.io or search wherever you get podcasts. And hopefully we're going to have Matt on at some point this summer when he wraps up his school year.
I would love to join. I would.
The crossover event waiting to happen.
Let me know the time and the place. I'll try to be there.
Hey, we don't really use them there, but that's great. That's good for you. Just in case, you never know. D&D game might break out.
I'll just have them. I'll just kind of like hold them. Yeah. They're mostly for security.
UpForDebate.tv is our website. You should go there, check out all the past episodes, including last year's book club, and you should also subscribe to us wherever you get podcasts or the video version on YouTube. And, of course, you can contact us at UpForDebateTV on Twitter or email us upfordebatetv@gmail.com. But we are going to end it here. We appreciate you being here. On behalf of Matt, I'm Sean. Have a great night. We'll see you next time for another Up for Debate.